by just flipping it onto the back side. I have a piece that was my prototype that's just on some scrap paper. It's just your classic accordion binding with channels in between. As I said, I've been doing this one for years. Back in 2009, I had a version of this in my Purse mini albums that had the channels, and I just had double fins, and that's shown with this. So this thing, it just had double fins, so it was like pockets to hold these, but essentially the same sort of thing, an accordion fin type binding. So then after I did that one, again, that was one of my earliest projects back in 2009. And then I also did the honeycomb accordion, which used the fins to where I would split them so that I could make a cascade, or I would use them on a full size page. And that one basically, again, was the folded accordion fins, but rather than it being a solid one-piece channel, it has that extra little fold to make it honeycomb, and that was to allow it to flex, because on this album I did not put a solid spine onto it. So, over the years, having done quite a few of these, excuse me, then before I put glue or adhesive in to make those fins, I would look at it and I flipped it over. And I thought to myself, what if we put something down into these channels so that then pages could get attached to that? So I thought about things like, I have a piece of ribbon, so you could put ribbon down in there, sandwich it in the channel, then that gives you something flexible to attach your page to. I have tons and tons and tons of pages that are a sleeve style of page ever since I started doing these kinds of bindings back in 2010, 2011. That's the kind of pages I've been doing. So you can attach it to something like a piece of ribbon, which is easy. I've used fabric fins on different bindings, all sorts of things. My latest thing that I'm using is a fabric, woven fabric tape with a really strong adhesive, otherwise known as hockey stick tape. Many of you know my son has been a goalie in hockey for the past several years, so we have lots of this tape out in our garage. And I went out there one day looking for something. I've done a video, one of my last videos, I did a binding using hockey stick tape, so you can go watch that video. But I went out in the garage looking for something else, and I saw this, and a light bulb went off, and I thought, So I did a binding with it, as again, I did a video of that, but I've also done this one using some of these, and what I did is I've made little tabs by taking a section of the tape. It's got really good adhesive. You're not going to want to use a medical type of cloth tape like this, because it's not going to be sticky enough. The beauty of this is it's like super sticky. If it'll stick to a hockey stick that's hitting hockey pucks, it's definitely tough stuff. But I've just taken and folded it over to create then some tabs. And what I'm doing with this binding today is I'm taking these tabs and they are being sandwiched into the channel so that I have multiple tabs sandwiched in that channel, and then my pages can attach to those. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I am calling this Undercordion binding because it's an accordion binding, but we're using the underside. So Undercordion binding. So let's go ahead and let me show you how I'm using that. First off, let me show you how it's working in. This is just the raw album. I've just started to embellish inside of it. But this is the album that we're going to be doing on National Scrapbook Day, and I have a page here that's just partially installed. And what I've done is these are kind of two-step pages. It has a page that has a 1/2 inch sleeve type, the sleeve type of attachments where it's open along one side, the binding side, so then that slips down over those tabs. And what I've done with this is I have that for the main body of the page, but then I have different inserts that go in between the pages. So I've made these tabs extra long so it pops out from that 1/2 inch section and it leaves 1/2 inch sticking out to where then I can then attach this onto those tabs, and it's got not only the main page but the insert page attached to those same tabs. If I didn't want to have this insert, I could just make these tabs a little bit shorter so it just allows for that main part of the page. You'll see more about this as I start assembling the book in subsequent videos. So this is the first video of the construction of this album, and so we're going to create our binding base. Now on this binding, we're going to have a thickened spine, so it's about a 1/2 inch deep spine, and then the covers are attached. Now, just like I did on the last video for the bindings, I'm using this stick tape also to attach my covers to my spine. I've been doing this for a little while now, and it's working really great. This is super strong stuff. I'm using it in black. It also comes in natural, which you can use sprays and inks on to color to whatever color you want. Excuse me, good old allergies. But you could also use fabric, ribbon, that sort of thing to attach. I just know that a lot of people have problems with their paper cracking at these joints. So I've been using fabric on my binding covers or my album covers for several years now because it's so strong and durable and doesn't crack. So when I cover these, I'm going to cover this right up to the joint, but not going over the joint. And so then that is what's taking all that flex, and it's nice and easily flexible. I'm not worrying about it cracking. So, but you can use the hockey stick tape, which is readily available. I talk about this a lot more on that last email, or last video, I'm sorry. And that is available on Amazon. It's available wherever there's a skating rink that has a shop inside. You're going to be able to find stick tape, but you can order it off of Amazon, off of any hockey supply stores. If you're in Canada, you probably can get it in the grocery store, but it's easy to get a hold of. Comes in 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, all sorts of colors. It's pretty amazing stuff. Pretty darn cool. So all those years of having to trip over hockey pucks in my entryway and hockey sticks everywhere and it seems like millions of miles in the past couple years for hockey stuff. It's great that I'm actually getting to use it in my scrapbooking now. So what we're going to start out with is we're going to create our spine. The width that I'm using on this is a nice comfortable width. It allows for 5 pages with the configuration that I have on this, which allows what I'm calling the deck are these pieces and the channels. The decks are 3/8 of an inch wide. When I first started doing some of these fin bindings, for instance, when I was doing the one that is in my purse, or when I started doing Stack the Deck bindings, I spent days deciding between the width options that I had, and I finally settled on the 1/4 of an inch. Recently, all of us are doing pages that have a lot more folds and flip outs and dimensional stuff on them. So I've increased on this. I'm going to have 3/8 inch decks in between the channel slots that my fabric tape tabs are going to set into. And then I'm going to allow some side decks on each side, so that, and then there's going to be tabs. This was just kind of my prototype, but it's easy to see because it's in white. So then I'm going to have some tabs that pull down that help to attach the binding to the sides. So what we're going to start out with then is we're going to make our spine, and then we're going to fold our chipboard, our cardstock, to fit into our chipboard spine. So with this, I have this 2 7/8 wide. I think that's a comfortable dimension. It's 5 pages. I make the majority of my albums with 5 pages. The fact that these pages have a zillion things included in them so that you can get a lot of real estate in a single page gives you tons of real estate to attach your memorabilia, photos, journaling, and all that sort of thing. So 2 7/8 wide. I've made mine 11 inches tall because that's what works for my album. You can adjust the height to whatever height that works for you, but I would say, unless you want to redo all the math, the 2 7/8 works awesome for the majority of albums, no matter what kind of page you're putting into it. A 1/2 inch depth is plenty. If for some reason you want a deeper channel, you can adjust the depth of your spine piece to match your channel. So my channels are 1/2 inch deep, so I have these as 1/2 inch as well. I've attached these with what I call construction strips. Construction strips are 3/4 inch strips that are scored down the center line. I then use a strong adhesive such as score tape or red tape and 1/4 inch, and I attach that on each side of the fold. Now you want to make sure you maintain close proximity to the fold in the center. That's more important than being close to the edge, because that's where it's going to take, it wants the adhesive to be. But I use these by the thousands on my 3D projects, because that's what I use to attach then these sides. So I can go ahead and attach it on all 4 sides. I'm going to leave the corners open for the moment, and then we'll close those up in a bit. But next step, after we get this ready, have my binding covers ready, and we're going to be attaching those covers to my spine. I even made a note for myself to make sure you attach those first before you attach your binding. But next up, I want to talk about the cardstock for the binding. And let me get this at an angle so that you can see it. This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. This 8.5 by 8.5 width is going to give you those 5 slots for pages that are 1/2 inch deep with a 3/8 inch depth deck between them. You wouldn't have to do any math if you decide that that size is working well for you. So what we're going to do is, I started out at the very center line, or at 4 1/4 inches, and scored a line. On each side of that line, I scored 1/2 inch, and that's my center channel. That's the channel here in the middle. On each side of that, I have a 3/8 inch section. That is the center channel, this deck, and this deck. And then I can move over. I have another 1.5 inch section, 1/2 inch section for my next slot, 3/8 inch for my next deck, 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch for my outermost slot. I then have a 5/8 inch deck along the outer edge, because many times we put stuff on our inside of our front and back cover, so that allows some space for that. And then I have a 3/8 inch tab that allows me to attach onto the side. The 3/8 is not a magic dimension. If I had an extra 1/4 inch to the width of this, that would be 1/2 inch, just like the depth of my channels. If you prefer to have your side deck be 1/2 inch, you can have these both be 1/2 inch. I repeated that over on the other side. So from my center line, I have a 1/2 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and then 5/8 and 3/8. So let's go ahead and get this folded so that it looks like this one. So I'm going to start at that center, just because that just seems to work best for me. If you want to start at one side and work your way over, that's great. So this is then folding, and that's creating the bottom of the first channel. So then I'm going to do my accordion fold, which is folding in the opposite direction on each side. So then I'm folding down along that 3/8 inch to form that first deck on each side of that center channel. So see how that's forming that first channel and the deck on each side. So then this next channel, the valley. And then we have a mountain fold. And another mountain fold. A mountain fold is when it folds up. A valley fold is when it folds down. So the fold on the center of each of the slots or channels is a valley, and the folds on each side of your deck pieces are mountain folds. And then I'm going to fold that tab along that side edge down as well. All right, so now I can start folding on this other side. Fold back. You always also want to burnish in with a bone folder, as you see I do with each one of these folds, just to give yourself a nice crisp crease. And we have our wider side decks. It's kind of like, you know, the deck on the side of a pool. Gives you something to base from. All right, so I'll bring those channels, make sure they fold back and forth both ways. It's funny when this accordion binding first became popular, it was ironic because I had decided not to pursue going further with it because of the thickness of this fold. It showed on some of my pages, and I didn't like that. So then I went to stack the deck with a single layer, but then everybody's been bothered by the fact that it is only a single layer. I don't know what everybody does to their albums, but they were concerned that it might tear. So people have preferred doing this this kind of double, but that's the beauty of having all sorts of different types of binding styles out there. But so somewhat familiar to many of you, but this is not up. This is the mountains are on the underside, and we have 5 channels or valleys. So what I'm going to do next is go ahead and put my score tape on there, and then I'm going to attach my tabs, because I'm going to be using the score tape to bring those channels together. But we're going to, when we bring those channels, we want to sandwich these tabs in, but it's much easier to put the tape on before you put the tabs on. I did that one time where I put the tabs on first and then I went to put the score tape on. It was a lot more challenging. All right, so I'm going to run my score tape down one side, the entire length of one side of each of the 5 channels. Since they're 1/2 inch deep, I'm using my 3/8 inch score tape, but 1/4 inch will work just fine. You could also use glue if that's your preference. I always think glues and adhesives are very subjective, so use whatever is your favorite method. All right, so we're getting this done on all 5 of those, and then on my tabs on each side that are 3/8, I'm going to run a 1/4 inch tape down each of those. So that's on that tab, and then I'll put one on this tab, and then that's all score taped up and ready to go. So next up, I'm going to be, so you want to make sure that it's kind of like a shadow. If you look at it this way, you don't see them. You look at them that way, you do. So that's all on the same side of the 5 channels. So then I'm going to, because I'm right-handed, so having these all leaning right, on the side that doesn't have the score tape is where we are going to apply our tabs. Now I'm doing 3 tabs per page. I have them come in about 1 inch on each end and 1 in the center. This is plenty for you to attach your pages with. Others may prefer, if you like using ribbon, you can have a longer strip if you prefer to have a strip rather than the tabs. I kind of like the tabs. Now, on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th page, I'm going to have this coming in 1 inch on each side and in the center. On the 2nd and 4th channels, I'm going to have my tabs come in 2 inches from the sides and in the center. And that's because on my 2nd and 4th pages, it's a different style page, I have a center insert section that's narrower, and I want my tabs to fit inside of this one as well. If I had them at 1 inch, this wouldn't attach on. So I have them come in 2 inches and at the center so that this can attach onto it. So, and that's on the 2nd and 4th channel. So I'm going to be on the 1st page and the 3rd page. These tabs are going to be at the center and 1 inch in from the edge. And then on the 2nd page, they're going to be 2 inches in and then at the center. So it's going to get attached somewhat like that. Now I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on these to attach them. You could do them with score tape, but because this is what my pages are attaching to, I want them to have that little bit of glue on them. And I'm just going to attach it to the side without the score tape and just attach that down. Now I'm eyeballing that in at 1 inch. You can obviously measure it. Now I'm putting the glue close to the end, the cut end of my tabs and not at the fold end. And you want to bring that just down to where it's just touching to the fold at the bottom of the channel without going over it, because it really makes it hard to fold it into the channels, sandwiching them together. Now I'm using 1 inch tape, so I can kind of use that as my measuring guide for these 2nd and 4th channels, because they're in 1 inch closer to the center. Let's go over here on this side. Whoops, it's a little bit excessive on that glue. Now I'm just eyeballing the center, obviously. Measure it if that makes you more comfortable. I'm running out of glue. I'm going to have to pick some up before this weekend. Okay, so I'm attaching on the 1st, 2nd, 1st, 3rd, and 5th channel. These are 1 inch in, 2nd and 4th. Now these tabs, because I have these double attached pages with that insert, these are, the finished length is 1.5 inches. Because I have a 1/2 inch channel, I have a 1/2 inch sleeve on the main part of the page, and a 1/2 inch sleeve on the insert part of the page. So I want these to be 1.5 inches. If I just had your basic typical page, I'd have these only be 1 inch long, because I have the 1/2 inch that goes into the slot and 1/2 inch for the page sleeve. So these are a little bit longer because I have these double-stepped kind of pages. But you could do 1 inch is for your typical album. We're using 1.5 inches for this album that I'm doing. Now, the album that I'm doing, all of the videos for constructing the album and embellishing it are going to be here on YouTube as a free tutorial in honor of National Scrapbook Day. It's also going to have a box that it's going to fit into. Okay, so those are all stuck down. So then I have all of my tabs glued on. Probably would typically let this dry for a few minutes before I start sandwiching it. But what I'm going to do is I'll remove that score tape and I'm going to sandwich it so that those tabs are then sandwiched in that channel. So I can just peel off this paper backing and working my way across. Just bringing that together. So then that, just like it is on any other accordion binding, you're just forming that channel. We're just using the underside. Sandwich that in. We're going to do each one. There's 3. Four. And 5. So I can go then on this back side. Make sure they're burnished. So then we want these kind of to stand up relatively straight up. We don't want them leaning one side or the other. And then my tabs are all set and good to go and ready for us to be attaching our pages. So we've got a nice smooth deck. We've got our tabs ready to attach our pages. I can fold under my tabs once again. And then this is all going to set down inside of our box. It's going to get attached to the sides, attached to the ends, and that's going to form a nice clean binding that we'll then attach our pages to. Now, before I set this down inside my spine box, I do want to attach, while I can leave this flat, I want to attach my covers to the spine box. So, just like I have done in that previous video, I'm going to use my hockey tape, my stick tape. Make sure when you're ordering tape, you don't get sock tape. Now, sock tape is not as sticky as, and it's kind of a clear plasticky stuff. So you definitely want the stick tape, which is a woven cloth. Okay, so I'm running that down close to my seam line. I've extended beyond at the top and bottom. I'm going to then allow a gap, somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to attach that, and I'm going to I think I'm just going to go ahead and wrap that on the ends. I can then put some more on the inside. Now this one I'm not going to extend beyond. Covers over that joint, nice and cleanly. Burnish that on. Make sure it's burnished on both sides, and that just hinges very easily, and it's super strong. Do the same thing on this other side. So on one side I'm going to extend it, about 1/2 inch beyond. On the other side I'm going to stay within that. And that close to the joint. I want a little bit longer on this end, so trim that off a bit. Take my other cover, set that so where it's about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch gap. You don't need to do more than that because it kind of gets a little wobbly. You know, we did wider gaps when we were using paper, but with this cloth, it doesn't need to be as wide. So then I'm going to cut the outside piece. It's funny, when I was digging to find what other tapes my son had, I found like 3 pairs of my Tim scissors. It's amazing how my husband, and both of my kids have stolen my Tim scissors. Alrighty. So there I've got my covers attached on there. They're nice and flexible. This will still be able to come up and attach and become a box. I'm not going to pull these guys up just yet because I want to attach this in here first. And so I'm going to be wanting to attach my sides before I bring those ends up, because I want to, one side I can attach it, the other side I need to attach it and then burnish it. So I need to be able to reach down in there. Now I'm going to attach this first side, and I want this tab to run right alongside that joint. So I'm laying that tab, it's on the inside, so I can burnish that on, and that's right inside that joint. See how I did that right there? This other one's going to go on this other side. But one thing some of you may decide that you want to do, it's not a have to, but I like doing it, is running a little bit. It just can be kind of, doesn't have to be the full length, but just kind of some spots along the way, is I like to add some glue to keep these guys from flopping around or lifting up. So on these fins on the back side, the ones that you may typically be attaching your pages to, but that are now on the underside, just more like ribs at this point rather than fins. So then I can just roll that down, making sure this one's straight up. I'll hold it in place for a second. Let it kind of set in. Doesn't have to dry. Fold that out just a little bit so that when I fold this up, it can attach right to it. Now remember, it's not as deep, so it wants to be lifted up just a little. So if I get it at each end, and then I take something long and skinny, You can use a knitting needle. I'm using some chopstick to where I can reach inside of there and burnish that along to attach to the side. So that's why I haven't flipped my ends up yet, because I'm attaching that tab on that side. So you want this side to be flush and this side to be flush with our joints. So at this point now I can attach my end pieces up. Kind of hold this in place. This is a good time then, once you get that burnished on, is if I weren't doing this for the video, I would probably let this dry just a little bit to let those your kind of ribs underneath attach and dry. So I am going to cut 4 little tabs from my construction strip that are just under 1/2 inch, and I'm going to put these on the outside of these 4 corners to hold those tabs up. So that fold goes right at the corner. So I've added tabs, and I'll add those onto all 4 of the corners. On the other end as well. Okay, so I have those tabs down on all 4 corners, so that forms my box. Set that down inside. Everything should be nice and flush. This is where then I take, again, this is kind of an option, but I'm going to run some tape. You can run a strip of pattern paper, cardstock, that goes from this top and wraps around to the side. It could be like a construction strip. Probably would do it in the black, the same color, to cover over that end. I'm just going to use some of my tape because that's what I've got going on around it. Now this can extend longer, and we can just snip it at the joint and wrap it. Oops, that's coming off. So I'm going to extend about 1/2 inch in. Burnish that on. Now I am going to snip it at the joint of the cover, and this one's going to just wrap down, whereas this one's going to wrap around to the front. So that covers that edge there, because I see that edge is open, so we want to close up that gap. It also helps keep these from lifting up at all. So again, using my tape, but again, you can use cardstock, you could use ribbon, you could use fabric, whatever is your choice for covering that over. Because this would work just as well with some black cardstock. I'm going to snip at the joint. Wrap this one just down and wrap this one onto the front of my cover. The beauty of using this tape is that my paper then can go right up and over the top of it and come just really close to that corner. Now, I also am going to go ahead and cover this outside edge, but again, this could be wrapped with paper if you prefer. I'm just going to be wrapping it with my tape. So I'm going to start here at the bottom, come kind of up to the edge, that 1/2 inch edge. next to the joint, not going over the joint. Hopefully stuck to itself, but usually you can pull those apart. I'm just going to work my way around. Stick to my finger. That's also holding those tabs down, so giving it a little bit more strength. Wrap that one down. Okay, I'm going to extend just a little bit beyond so I can wrap around to the bottom. Nicely sticks onto itself. Alright, so we've got that wrapping all the way around all four edges. I'm going to just snip. You can just snip these straight. You can take out a wedge if you prefer. I'm just going to snip them straight right at the corners. Not the joints, the corners. And then I can just fold that over and stick it down. Burnish those corners a bit. And that gives me a nice cleanly covered all of these joints. Make sure my edges are all cleanly stuck down. So then I can actually even cover this 1/2 inch section with some pattern paper. I can cover my spine with pattern paper up close to the edge, and then obviously cover my cover up close to that edge. But this gives you a really nice clean binding. It gives you your covers and a really nice sturdy deep spine on it. Now when I go to attach my pages, let me just grab the insert that wasn't attached on this one and show you. When you go to attach your pages, you just will be splitting this open like we showed before, and it will slip down over. Now I will have further videos showing when I'm ready to attach pages into this book. I'll show you how to actually attach these, because this is running into this is a divided one, so it's running into that because these are too long. But the reason they're so long is because my outer one will slip over, and then this one will actually end up being way up here. So you'll have to see on the next, after the next couple of videos are showing the construction for the pages, and when on that second page construction video, I'll be showing you how to attach the pages to this binding, and that can be applied for other projects as well. So also, if you wanted to make these tabs this long on a regular basis, you could then always trim them down depending on what style of page that you're putting on there. But makes a really nice, clean binding and cover. So you'll be ready now to start constructing your pages so you can move on to the next video. Thanks a bunch.